Shooting! Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting sick and tired of only being able to kill our sheep by jumping on it. As you might have seen in some of my other videos, I'm not the best at jumping on things and killing them. There we go, I did a good job that time. So what this video is about is basically adding something so we can shoot a projectile from our player. So it will go to the right if I'm facing right, it'll go to the left if I'm facing left, and when it hits an enemy, like our sheep, then it might take like 5 hit points for it to die. And you can actually set it up so it'll die straight away, but it's a bit more fun when you've got like things which have got a bit like almost like a health bar. But anyway, we're not going to do a health bar side of things on this because I haven't worked out how to do it yet. But we'll still look at the shooting side of things. Right. So first things first, what I'll need to do is add a firing point to our player. So if I just zoom in on our player so we can get a little bit closer in. And the idea is the firing point will basically define, so we're going to create an empty and call it firing point, but it will define where the bullets or the projectiles are going to come firing out from. So my firing point is right there, which is great, and I'm just going to put it from that point there. So it's going to shoot from the wing of the chicken or the player. Now, I haven't put it in the wing because I had a problem before. When I did do that, it just didn't seem to work. So I've deliberately left it out a little bit so it doesn't kind of conflict a bit. Hopefully you don't have that problem, but it's something I did have a problem with. Right, next thing we need to do, our player, we're going to have to add a script to this called projectile behavior. I press enter a couple of times and it will appear here. Now that shouldn't be there firing. Let me get rid of that a second. All right. Projectile behavior, basically this is the script where we're going to say where the bullet is going to come from in respect of the firing point we've just set up. So just give me a second while that does what it needs to do. Why is it taking so long? It's ridiculous how long these things take. And right, so let's open up projectile behavior. And as usual, I've already got code set up where I'm just going to copy this code and then I'll save it and explain it to you as we're kind of waiting for it to load up. So I'll save it, pop it in there, scroll to the top. Whoa, why have I done it? I see that bugs me, that extra line there. Whoops, using it. And then I'll save it, come back onto Unity so it does its little kind of upload thing. Please let me go back on. There we go. Right. So what this is then, we're basically going to kind of say where our firing point is. So we're going to connect up that little point we just set up. We're going to refer to something called a bullet prefab, which we haven't actually made yet, but that's what it's kind of referring to. And we're also going to use some code from our player movement script. And that code in particular is this bit here where it says facing right. Now, on our player movement script, when we turn left, our player literally does face left, and when we press right, it turns to face right. There's like a flip thing we did, and that's what that is referring to. And the idea is when you're facing right, you will be able to shoot to the right, and when you're facing left, you'll be able to shoot to the left. Now the idea is when we press down fire one, which is the left cursor key, this shoot procedure will get called, and like I said, then it will actually put the bullet in our firing point, ready for it to kind of get shot across the screen. So if I come back on to Unity and it's finished doing what it needs to do, the next thing I need to do is actually to get a bullet to actually make a bullet for it to be able to shoot. I can't speak. I do apologize. So you can actually make your own bullets just by going to 2D objects and messing around with the shapes which are here. I've actually made my own one, which I'm going to bring up onto the scene, and it's behind everything for some reason. So I'm going to make it so it's in front of everything by doing the sprite renderer. I was debating whether or not I should make it smaller, but actually I'm going to keep it as it is. But I can resize if I wanted to using that tool there, the rect tool. A couple of things I need to do on this, first of all. I need to add a tag to it. So it's called bullet. So I'm going to add a tag and make it called bullet like so. And I know that doesn't add anything to it at this stage, so I'm just going to make sure it's selected there. Because the idea is when a bullet comes in contact with our enemy, it recognizes that it's a bullet and then it carries out a few lines of code to make that like enemy destroy or bounce back, that type of thing. Another thing I need to do, I need to add a collider to this. Now it's a circle, so I'm going to make a circle collider. And again, I'm going to zoom in so we can see it a bit better. I need to tick is trigger. So again, when it does hit something, it carries out an action. And my radius, I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. I really struggle with doing this. Too big. Way too big. Right, Jesus, where are we going? Wrong way. I want to drop it so it's just that one bit, that bit, and I'll keep it like that because it's kind of good practice to make your collider smaller than the object themselves. And then the last thing I need to do is make sure that I've got a rigid body attached to it, because otherwise it won't recognize there as something when it bumps into things. It'll just kind of travel right the way through it. And I just want to tick freeze position Y. So basically what that means is it will only travel on the left and right side of things. Well, I think that's what it'll do anyway. Otherwise, I'll need to come back and have a mess around with the gravity scale. Right, so there's our bullet made, and we need to make this a prefab. So if I zoom out a little bit so we can just see the scene a bit better. Now, how I do that, I basically grab the bullet from the left-hand side and drag it down into our assets. It does this little blue thing, and then it makes like a grey box appear around there, and it's blue here as well. Now I'm going to delete it from there because I don't need it. And just to explain what a prefab is, the idea is a prefab, so something we've set down here with all those settings which we just did, can get called up onto the scene by a line of code, which is kind of some of the code we had on our projectile behavior, which is this instantiate bit, which basically brings the bullet on and it puts her into the firing point position and that rotation as well, so if it's facing left or right. So it's this instantiate bit of code basically. And the idea is then it can kind of get pulled up as many times as needed. So if you're like trigger happy and shooting left, right, and center, these bullets go flying left, right, and center then, and it's just literally pulling up a copy of this up onto the scene every single time. Right, something I need to do first of all, I don't think I've done it yet, so on the player, I haven't actually connected anything up here. If I so the firing point, and this is the projectile behavior bits we set up, needs to go in there. The bullet prefab gets pulled over to here, and the player movement, that player movement script which we were referring to, we just click on player there. And the idea is now when I press play, what should happen is that when I press the left cursor key, the bullet should appear on the scene. But there's no code at this stage which makes it go movement in any respect. So if I just press left, it appears. If I turn left, I press left mouse button again, it appears. And as you can see, I can press as many times as I want. And it's basically pulling up this up onto the scene all the time. Now, that's not any good to us. And in fact, because it's not moving. And secondly, if it kind of got the sheep hit into it, like it just did, then it's not going to cause any damage because we haven't coded that part yet. So the next thing we need to do is add a bit of code to our bullets which appear up on the scene. So we're going to add a component. We're going to do a new script called firing, and when it loads up, I'm going to let it load up in here. Again, I'm going to go and pinch stuff from my document, and I'll try to explain it as well once it's in there. Right, let me save that, and let me go back onto here so we can do this little thing. Why won't it let me go back on it? Oh, it does, there we go. Right, so what this does then, we can decide how fast the bullet is going to be moving. It's got a rigid body, so it recognizes that, so we'll have to kind of connect that up as well. And the idea is, when it does appear on the screen, it starts to shoot in the direction which we are facing, so that'll be like facing left, with the code we've used for the projectile behavior, and it'll move it in by the speed which we set it as. Now this couple of lines of code here, it's not something which you need to have, but it's kind of just keeping things tidy, because the idea is when you shoot and the bullet goes to the left of the screen, which is the basically the X less than 0, then it disappears. And if we shoot to the right of the screen and it goes up to the screen width, then it also disappears as well. Because otherwise you could be trigger happy, like I said earlier, shooting, and those bullets are never disappearing. So they're still part of like the game processing. So it's kind of nice and tidy to get rid of them if they go off screen then. Right, so now what should be happening, and that should be all okay. The idea is now, oh, I can't do it yet, actually, can I? Let me just have a look here because I haven't set the speed or the rigid body. So I need to drag across the bullet so it's connected, and I'm going to have my speed at 15. Let's see how that goes. So the bullet should appear on the stage. We know that bit works. And the idea is that with our firing bit of code, it should make the bullets kind of move, as in heading in a particular direction. So if I press left, yay, it's moving. The problem is it's not actually hitting, it's not doing any damage to the sheep at this point. But the one thing I do want to point out, if I can just minimize that across there, as I'm shooting, you'll notice that this is going up and down. I'm not quick enough to actually, but they basically disappear when they get past that point. and it's the same if I face this way, then they disappear. Doesn't matter how many I shoot, but every time it goes past the x equals 0, or x is less than 0, then they disappear. Right, we've got to sort out the sheep then. So let's now add, if I zoom in a little, zoom out a bit, we're going to add a bit of code to this guy, and it is going to be called shoot sheep, we're going to call it. Now, you can call it a shoot enemy, but I'm just for the time being, because it's a sheep we're killing, I want to do shoot sheep. Now, this could be used on any of our enemies, basically, once we've got it set up. So if I go to shoot sheep, God, that's hard to say, that sounds really weird. Shoot sheep, shoot sheep, sheep, shoot sheep, sheep, shoot sheep. I think I said something I shouldn't have said then. Anyway, right, so when this loads up, and it will load up. We've got again another bit of code which I'm going to drag across. Now there are quite a few things which are commented in this code, and I'll explain why in a moment. But let's just get it across first of all, and into the place it needs to be. And right, and I'll save. Let's just go back onto here so it does its job. Maybe I was doing the compiling side of things. Right, so what this basically is saying is we need to kind of say what the bullet is in terms of what's going to be bashing into the sheep. I also need to change that to make that let's say shoot enemy, because that wouldn't work at all. So I saved it, but it's not actually going to do the job. It'll give me an error message actually when I come back to it. Right, so there we are. Let it compile, do what it's doing. The idea is then our sheep has 5 health points, and when the bullet comes in contact with the enemy, and again, look, there's that tag I was referring to, bullet then. So when a bullet comes in contact with the enemy, it takes away 1 life. Now, if the lives are 0 or less, or when they get down to nothing, then it destroys the sheep, and it also destroys the bullets then. And I think that's the other way around there. But if it doesn't, so if it's still on like 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, it only destroys the bullet when it hits into it, and it makes our enemy actually bounce to the right. Now, I need to change this code a little bit, because if you are the other side of the sheep and shoot facing to the left and shoot in there, then it'll actually bounce towards you, which doesn't seem quite right. But you'll see what I mean now when we come back onto the game. Now, these other bits which are greened out, you might kind of identify that these are to do with the scoring system in terms of the text boxes updating, but that's for you to kind of stitch together yourselves when you kind of do that on your games. But I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible. So on our sheep, a couple of things we need to set up. The enemy health points I can change if I really wanted to. The bullet is the prefab, which I need to drag across. And our enemy is actually the sheep. So I just want to drag our sheep across to this point, and hopefully when I press play, I should be able to shoot them. Well, I'm shooting at them. I just wanted to actually register that it's hit them. So like I said to you before, I haven't got a health bar or anything set up, but that's something I'm going to have to look at some stage. So if I shoot there, then it hits it, and it disappears. And what you might notice is as I'm hitting it, it's bouncing to the right. And when I got to 5 hit points, it disappeared. Now, like I said, if I was the other side of the sheep shooting it, then it would actually be bouncing towards me, which is a bit kind of odd. Now, the one thing I didn't like about that was the sheep is getting shot, and you wouldn't know it, other than the fact that it was bouncing back. It didn't seem to be affected in any way or taking damage. So the very last bit of code I want to be adding in, and I'll explain a couple of things to you now in a moment, is all these yellow bits. And this goes into our shoot sheep bit of code. So I need to bring those bits in. I need to chuck them there on the top, or more or less the top anyway. And I also need to bring in these bits. Again, I'll explain what these are now once we've kind of got them set up. Because these are referring to the images I've got. So I've got an original enemy, which is our sheep, the way we can see it on the scene. But I've also brought in a damaged sheep. So it's a sheep which has been kind of like hit or like shot or like clouted one, that type of thing. And the idea is when I hit it, when I shoot there and the bullet comes in contact, it will change to this. I also need to bring in these lines of code, and let's just drag that across. I don't know why I've got them both highlighted there. So this is after the health points then, right? Okay, so that goes here. And start coroutine. And then the last bit I need to bring over is this IE enumerator. I'll try to explain that a little bit now once I get it in here. So I think that goes there. Yeah, that goes there. Now the idea is, when we get kind of hit, this particular code gets pulled up, so it's actually referring to here this start code routine, and it will change to the damaged looking sheep, the one that looks like it's been clouted one. It will still bounce backwards, and it will wait for 1 second, and then it will go back to the original picture, so the original sheep which is looking angry, that type of thing. Now, I would love it so it would only be like half a second or a quarter of a second, but with this particular line of code, it only takes full numbers. So the smallest I can do is either 0 or 1. So 0 is pointless because you don't even, it won't do anything. But you'll see what I mean now when I come back to it. So if I just save the codes and come back onto Unity, and I might have to zoom back out on this bit when it lets me. Should I pause? Apologies, I'm back now though. So if I just zoom out so we can see everything and we click on our enemy, and you'll see that we've got these extra bits here. So my damaged enemy is this guy, and my original enemy is the one which we got there. So it's this sheep here. So I'm just going to drag it across. So the idea is now, when I hit there, it will change for a second. It'll still kind of move left and right and whatever it's doing, because our code's been set up on it. But when I shoot there, it changes, look, and then after a second it goes back to its original position or original image. So the idea is when I hit there a number of times and it dies, it'd be nice to have a little animation to save this died like that. But basically that's how you do shoot there.